Charlie, I was trained as a scientist, but I still find extrasensory perception very intriguing. Most people do. Why is that?
Well, I think one of the primary reasons is that when it happens in life, it's a reminder that the universe is a lot bigger than we think. You know, we think we've got it all figured out, the universe is tight and bound and we understand it, and then something totally inexplicable happens. In some ways that's scary, but in other ways it says it's big. There's mystery, there's interesting stuff to find out. At least that's certainly the way I approach it. Some people, I think, concentrate on the scary part. You know, if these things happen that don't make sense, then maybe we have to worry that we don't understand the universe well enough. But these are just basic human reactions.
Of all the different kinds of ESP, which are the ones that are the most profound, or the most those that are the most frightening to a traditional materialistic approach to the world?
I don't know. I mean, I suspect it would differ among different people. Take one example, the idea of psychokinesis, that the mind can exert a force just by mental action alone. That means if you could, let's say, exert 1 ounce of force, you could kill people in an undetectable way simply by holding down, say, the mitral valve on their heart. No blood pumping. Now, it hasn't been that long in terms of human history since we routinely burned people at the stake who we thought could do things like that. So there is a vast climate of fear that is not all that historically long ago and that may be part of our approach toward this. The other side of that is hope. The hope that we are spiritual beings, that we have a soul or something that's going to survive death. And materialism totally wipes out that hope. But when something psychic or extrasensory happens, that hope is revived or reinforced. Maybe my soul is indeed immortal, or that there's a benevolent force in the universe controlling it.
For exactly that reason is why I don't trust my own interest in it. And I tend to think that my own interest in ESP is really founded on wishful thinking, this hope, this desire for something that is really unreal. And therefore I draw back.
That's excellent. I think that is a really mature reaction, to question your own response and to begin to see that there are at least some irrational kinds of elements in the way you react to it. I think the people who think they're just making a logical decision about it are kidding themselves. We're human beings. We're all going to die, for instance. To say that you have no interest in the possibility of survival of death, I think is to really suppress some part of our humanity. So you're way ahead of the game if you look at why you are for it or against it or ambivalent about it. I wish everybody would be like that. When you know you're ambivalent, when you know there are irrational factors coming in, you have a chance to try to control for those and still get at the truth. When you don't know, when you pretend you're just objectively evaluating it, but really there's much more irrational stuff going on, you're totally controlled by it.
Okay, let's try to make some progress on this by looking at ESP as a collective group and looking at its Let's try to make some progress by taking ESP as a group and looking at its implications, because even if a small, minute fraction of what supposedly is ESP is real, discarding most of the public stuff as illusion or delusion or wishful thinking or just plain garbage. But if anything is true, in a sense of occurring outside of the bounds of the traditional scientific materialistic view, that's enormously probative of the nature of reality. So what are the implications of this?
Let's look at one specific implication. From the materialistic point of view, anybody who prays is wasting their breath and simply deluding themselves. There's no non-material being, because reality is only material. When you're praying, if you're speaking aloud, you're talking to yourself and stirring the air and the vibrations die out. If you're not even saying it aloud, you're not even having that much effect. Total waste of time. All right, now we have evidence, though, for experimental telepathy. People separated by all sorts of material barriers. One of them's trying to mentally send a message. Another one sometimes gets enough of it to know that telepathy occasionally happens. Oh, wait a minute, what is prayer but an attempt at some kind of telepathy? Suddenly you can't just totally dismiss prayer as impossible to have any effect. Maybe it does telepathically send out a message to big question mark, what it gets to. But that kind of implication immediately opens you up to saying we need to look at the spiritual more seriously.
So the existence of parapsychology as a real phenomena opens up the spiritual nature of human beings, if it's correct, and therefore its implications are far stronger than maybe its exact replicability, because it's certainly a weak phenomena in the ordinary world as we understand it, certainly from a scientific replicability at the very best.
When we intellectuals discuss spirituality, we tend to treat it as if it's a philosophical or a scientific theory. But that's not how it comes about. It comes about by people having profound experiences that change their life, and other people then picking up on these and organizing them into religions. But there's an experiential basis there. People experience healings that they think wouldn't make any sense in materialistic terms, or something happens that feels like a prayer has been granted. And sure, there's a lot of wish fulfillment and projection and delusion there, but enough of it happens to keep people thinking there's something real about the spiritual. Now, the spiritual calls on you to transcend a lot of your materialistic influences. You know, if we're more than just meat brains, we really are connected in some way and should treat each other well, that requires a big change in your lifestyle. Wouldn't you like some proof of that? Well, spiritual phenomena claim to offer proof of that there is some higher order, some higher level of meaning affecting these things. To me, that's really important to look at, because yes, again, lots of projection, lots of delusion, but I want to know what the core of reality is in that and how you live with it.
I find fascinating that what you do in seeing this enlarged vision of reality is to come from what you believe to be the certainty of paranormal phenomena occurring, rather than coming from an organized religious point of view, be it any religious group. That's not your view. Many people who go towards spirituality do it from the standpoint of their particular religion, and therefore, and go to spirituality. That's not the way you come about it at all. I find that fascinating.
Well, you know, as a kid, I developed a great dislike of being fooled. You know, I just didn't want to be taken in by things. And as I got older, as part of my spiritual growth and my psychological growth, I recognized how susceptible I am to that, you know. And if this were an AA meeting, I'd introduce myself as, "Hi, my name is Charlie, and my drug of choice is ideas and theories and schemes." I get off on those, but I want to not just get drunk on ideas, I want to know how much they work in reality. Essential science to me is a wonderful discipline, because it says, yeah, here's your ideas, but do they make any predictions about things you can actually observe and test for? And keep grounding your ideas in reality that way. So I don't want a spirituality that's just a great set of ideas that makes me feel good. I want to know what actually checks out in real life.
And parapsychological phenomena, as you see it, is a key to this, as opposed to the doctrines of any religion in particular.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I can say, all religions start with some founder who has some spiritual and maybe parapsychological experiences, and then the committees take over, and they revise it, and they make it into proper doctrine and whatnot. And a few hundred years later, it's all tied in with the civil authority, and many people are discouraged from having spiritual experiences. The Catholic Church, for instance, when they decide to canonize somebody, first thing they do is wait till they're dead, to make sure they can't do anything different that might not fit in with doctrine. And then they examine everything in their life to make sure it's doctrinally correct. They don't want any living saints. Suppose they said something that wasn't doctrinally correct. That's a real shame, because that means religion for most people is second-hand or third-hand. It's not based on direct spiritual experience, but on doctrination and so forth. That's very sad, and it also makes for a religion that's not very effective. In developing transpersonal psychology, what we're really looking for is how to help people have genuine spiritual experiences and integrate them into life in a healthy way, not to give them doctrines or beliefs of any sort. You know, the great founders of religions were all for that also. I'm reminded of a teaching of the Buddha, for instance, where he said, in effect, don't believe something just because it's sacred doctrine or prominent people believe it or it appeals to you. Test it. Keep testing it. And if it works out in testing it against reality, then you can adopt it. But don't take it on authority, even my authority. Very sensible idea.